I come from the music industry. And think about the music industry. You have artists that perform on stage, right? Now, PowerPoint and giving a lecture would be the equivalent to performing playback. You put together all your slides the night before, and then you get up on the stage the next day, and you got an interesting audience, and suddenly somebody says something really interesting, and all you can say is that, well, that's really interesting, but fortunately not my next slide. And then you're stuck, right? So we're going to perform very live today. I'm going to use a little whiteboard and a pen, and that's all I'm going to do, which is kind of ironic, because I'm going to talk about high technology. That's what I do. Okay, here we get going. So, imagine you arrive on planet Earth in 2017 from a foreign planet. So you're an extraterrestrial. What would you report back to your home planet? You have no idea of the history of this planet. You just arrive here in 2017, and all you see is this planet right now. You would probably report back that planet Earth consists of a phenomenon that seems to know where it's heading, and this phenomenon is called the internet. And to this phenomenon, you have 7 billion very confused bodies that are connected to the phenomenon itself. That's essentially what planet Earth looks like today. It's very, very chaotic. And it's very chaotic for the simple reason that we're right now going through the 4th major revolution of human history. Because if you look at it historically speaking, we have 4 different paradigms, and I'm going to build them from the bottom up. We have 4 different paradigms, all depending on how we human beings communicate with each other. You see, we have 4 different ways of communicating. We developed them at 4 different points in time in history. And each time a new communication technology has come along, this communication technology has meant that the amount of information available to human beings has exploded. But the amount of information is always stuck in a certain place. And what's ironic is that with each one of these revolutions, the new, bigger pile of information is always stuck in a place that's radically different from the place where it was stuck the last time. Meaning that at the old pile of information, you will have a class of people who think that things are like this and they will always remain this way, and these people tend to be very fat and lazy and conservative, and they don't want to change. Whereas suddenly in a different place, completely unheard of before, and of course underrated by the old elite, you will discover that there's a much bigger pile of information that eventually will take over the world. And at this new pile of information, you will have a new class emerging of people who are very smart and clever at communicating in this new method, with this new way of communicating, probably without even knowing it. And this is exactly what's happening in the world today. We have 12 major clouds of information called, you know, the super clouds today in the world, out of which 5 are located in North America, 5 are located in China, 1 each in India and Russia, and there's not a single one in Europe. Well, why is that? Well, because the last major revolution that happened in 1450 in Europe. So Europe is full of very fat and lazy old people who don't want to move. I happen to live on that continent. It's incredibly pathetic, okay? Nothing's really happening. The way you do things in Europe is that maybe we should have a cloud too in Europe, and then you organize some French bureaucrats within the European Union to develop a model for building a cloud over 10 years' time. And then finally when you make the decision, well, we should build a cloud in Europe too, then you got some old ladies who think their view will be disturbed, so they take it to court and stop the whole project from happening. That's why not a single skyscraper is built anywhere in Europe, but they're all built in China every week. That's the difference, right? So I'm ashamed of coming from Europe. Being European is like being really bad these days. But looking at this, we have 4 different ways of communicating. The first one we developed was spoken language about 150,000 years ago. The second one was written language, which we only developed about 5,000 years ago, ironically in Iraq. You know, it's probably not the center of the world these days. Then we developed printed language from 1450 onwards, starting in Germany. At least I know the Chinese developed it before that, but it actually happened in Germany in 1450. And when I talk about technological change, I really talk about the change itself, not the official place for the innovation. And after printed language, we now have to talk about interactive language. And interactive language started in the 1980s and is now exploding across the world. You're now on average spending something like 5 or 6 hours a day staring at smartphones and laptops. These smartphones and laptops did not even exist 30 years ago. So something has just moved itself into your life and taken over it completely, like 5 or 6 hours a day, which is now about as much as you sleep every day. And it's moving towards 7 or 8 hours, and we got virtual reality and new computer games, and we got augmented reality, all these things happening around the corner. Meaning 30 years from now, you're probably going to spend every waking minute of your day online. I'll tell you one thing, I invest in addiction clinics. It's the safest investment you could possibly make for the future, because we're all going to be addicts 10 years from now to all these technologies. Addiction clinics are exploding everywhere, and you can't move them, and you can't reinvent them in Korea or China, so they have to be exactly where people live. So that's a good idea. But that's where we're moving now. We're moving into the interactive age in a big way. Interactive technology is killing all the other previous 3 ways of communicating. We're not really printing anything any longer. If we mass distribute something, we do it interactively, we do it electronically online. We're certainly not handwriting anything. We stopped handwriting about 1550. About 100 years after the printing press, there was not a single handwriting monk or nun left in Europe at all. They stopped. They tried to stop the development as best they could. In 1517, France introduced a death penalty for the use of the printing press. Didn't really work, did it? You know, when I left the music industry, I left the music industry when they started hiring lawyers chasing teenagers at record companies. Any industry where they employ lawyers to chase teenagers is doomed, okay? Because teenagers will always do whatever they want, and they will always ignore their parents. And if that happens in your industry, get out, because it's probably dying. You know, Spotify is probably now worth more than all the world's record companies combined. It took less than 10 years for Spotify to get there, as an example. So these revolutions do happen, but what is interesting here, though, is that these revolutions always happen in a new place. And that's exactly what's happening in the world today. We have Wi-Fi everywhere. You have Wi-Fi in Kenya, in India, in Bangladesh, in South America. You don't only have Wi-Fi in Germany, and actually in Germany it's probably crappier than it is in Bangladesh. Germany still has cab drivers who you pay in cash. In Kenya, you don't even have credit cards anymore, because in Kenya you pay with mobile payment systems. Meaning that German companies today have to pay for Kenyan patents, because Kenya is much hungrier at it than Germany is. And this is always what happens at paradigm shift. There are always hungry people out there who, like, you know, have curiosity, and they want to get out there, and they realize they suddenly have a technology in front of them that can help them really empower themselves. And that's what's wonderful with the internet. It's empowering millions, even billions of people around the planet right now who are discovering that they can be ahead of other people competing with others. Okay. Now, the problem with this is that this entire development happened over the last 5,000 years. And if we're going to make a really thorough study of what's going on at the moment, we can only use these 2 factors. What does it mean to be human, and what is technology? And we'll then discover that being human is a constant in our analysis, and technology is the variable, meaning that we human beings haven't really changed over the past 5,000 years. We still give birth to the same stupid babies we did 5,000 years ago. That's exactly what women who go on Instagram these days, they post, you know, pictures of cats and babies. Because they had cats and babies in the tribe 5,000 years ago, and they love cats and babies. The problem is that all women post pictures of cats and babies, so they're not very original. Meaning that 95% of pictures on Instagram are not seen by anybody. You know this, girls. You have Instagram, all of you, and you know, you just upload pictures all the time. Like if there's some expecting audience out there waiting to see your picture. Well, there's no audience out there because everybody else is busy uploading the same cat and baby pictures as you are. I always tell this to people about the internet. Nobody knows what they're doing. If they knew what they were doing, they would do things very different than what they do. So we are human, and that means that it's in the spoken language paradigm that we are stuck genetically. We are born into tribes. We are looking for tribes everywhere. And this is exactly why this hits the button on a really terrible new religion we invented that came after printed language. What happened after printed language is that all over Europe you had people who were sitting with a little lamp at night and they were reading books. And this person started believing in a new religion that was invented in 1637 called individualism. Well, individualism is now dying. It's now an underclass phenomenon to take a selfie. You're a vulgar person if you do. Especially if you're a man and you're over 40 years old, you tend to believe that the internet is a phenomenon where you're supposed to post a newsletter about yourself every week. You all know that newsletter, right? You get it in your mailbox all the time. He's always a man, he's over 40 years old, and he's trained to think that he's going to dominate the world. So he writes a newsletter about himself every week. And at the end of the week, the newsletter says, here's my new book and my new record, and here's where you can buy it. What do we do with this newsletter about this guy talking about himself all the time? We throw it in the spam box. Because we hate it. Because individualism is dying. And it's dying precisely because we are returning to the tribe. So the first thing the internet enables us to do when suddenly 7 billion people are all active participants in the communication is that we're looking for tribes. Now, but here's the problem though. This system of tribes worked when we were nomadic. When we were nomadic, we were walking around across the planet trying to find food to eat all the time. We had matriarchs at the center of the tribe. We had patriarchs at the outer circle of the tribe. These were the older men and older women who ruled the tribe. Because obviously the oldest person in the tribe was the data bank. Since the only place where you could store information at the time was in your mind. So we memorized things. That's why younger people respected the older. There was no division between men and women in that sense. Women were as powerful as men were because the only division that existed was between the older and the younger. Meaning that we're programmed to think within the tribe that older people probably have more wisdom than the younger people do, and they do. It's called life experience these days. But this is the structure we train to think. So we try to find this structure in anything we move into in this environment. That means that when you look at Facebook, for example, the vast majority of people will only have 200 Facebook friends, and then they're set. Okay, so you get 200 Facebook friends. You know what? Most of these 200 Facebook friends also tend to live in your own neighborhood. They also tend to be of your gender. They also tend to have your sexual orientation, whatever that is. They also tend to be your own ethnicity. Because we're trained to think that if we just have 200 people around us, everything we need in our lives will be fulfilled. And in the world of socioanalysis where I work, I should write down this word, socioanalysis here. I am a philosopher, meaning that I don't do sociology. Sociology is brilliant, but it's an empirical science. So sociology relates to psychology. Psychology is a science about single human beings. Sociology is the same science about groups or tribes. Now, in the world of philosophy, instead, we do psychoanalysis. And I'll tell you one thing. Psychoanalysis can go deeper than psychology because precisely I don't have to prove anything. It's an art form. So psychoanalysis is an art form. And the equivalent of that in the social arena is socioanalysis. That's what we're doing right here. So if we take a socioanalytical approach to the tribe, what are the benefits and what's the problem with the tribe? Well, the tribe really worked here over 5,000 years ago, meaning most people today will try to find 200 Facebook friends and then they're set. And these Facebook friends try to reflect themselves. Because within a group of 200, we find exactly the amount we think, we're programmed to think, of multiplicity, meaning we have a diversity of opinions, which is good for our survival, but they're not too different from ourselves, meaning we can still love them without an effort. Okay? In the world of socioanalysis, we call this intra-tribal. Remember this. There's a very, very little distinction here, different, but it's dramatic. Because opposed to intertribal, we have to look at the intertribal. Meaning, why do you have 200 Facebook friends when the cost of having 5,000 Facebook friends is 0? The only reason you have 200 Facebook friends is because you programmed to have 200 friends. You're now discovering you live in a world where people who have 5,000 Facebook friends that are spread across the planet are going to be way ahead of you. Why is that? Because suddenly you have media where it doesn't cost you anything to have more than 200 friends. But that means you have to fight your own genetic programming, which is that I'm going to be fine with 200 people that are basically like me. That's the easy part. We don't have to spend a single penny on educating any human being on this planet to love people that are at the most 200 people out there. Because that's how we survived in the tribe. Anything out the tribe was just dangerous and enemy territory. You'd probably kill the person from another tribe if you could. Okay? Here, though, we are now 7 billion people on the same planet. And we can't kill each other. That means the people who can communicate the most efficiently with 7 billion people, or at least with people who have access to 7 billion people, are going to be the winners of this society. And there are very few people who are born with the capacity to love strangers. That's bad news. Unless we decide that the #1 priority in the 21st century is to force ourselves, educate ourselves to love strangers. This is the shift from the intertribal to the intertribal. And I would say, because we now have technology we cannot get rid of, the genie is out of the bottle. From now on, we're going to have to live with the internet. The internet's even constructed. You can throw neutron bombs at it, it will still be there. If human beings, one day our civilization is completely over, what will be left on this planet will be cockroaches and the internet. That's it. The internet with machines probably rather than human beings in it. So the internet will not go away, even if we do. So we now have to get adjusted to the fact that this phenomenon has taken over the world. And that means we have to go to ourselves, we especially have to go to our children, and realize that the people who can communicate with people who are different from themselves are going to be the winners in the society, but it's going to take an awful lot of training to be able to do that. Now there's a challenge for you, and this is what the internet is all about. Thank you so much for having me.